Good evening and welcome everybody, and it's my inestimable privilege to introduce you to Dr. Paul Dalton, who's the head and clinical lead of the Department of Psycho-Oncology at St Vincent's Hospital, University Hospital. He's also adjunct lecturer at UCD. He trained clinically at TCD and in mindfulness-based cognitive behaviour therapy in the University of Massachusetts in the US. Paul's primary clinical and research interests are in mindfulness interventions in healthcare, and for the last 10 years he's been teaching mindfulness-based cognitive therapy in UCD, RCSI and Trinity. Paul is published nationally and internationally. We're very proud of him. And he's on the expert, he's an expert member of the Research Ethics Committee at St Vincent's. He's a board member of the Irish Association of Palliative Care and has been doing fantastic work on end-of-life issues. We'll hear a little bit more about that later. And finally, he's a committed cyclist. He's a fantastic colleague. I can attest to that personally myself. Where would I be without Paul? And I believe he's a reasonable cook, but I don't have an evidence base for that. So I give you our new president, Dr. Paul Dalton, who's going to talk to you about Psychology for All. So Paul.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Max. I was coming down the stairs and I was feeling very anxious, and I thought I could have a panic attack, and I thought, well, I'm in good company. So if that happens, someone will come to the rescue. So I was talking over the last couple of days to a very senior and well-known former member of council. And it was just yesterday, and they asked me, what has PSI and Tralee got in common? And I said, I'm really not sure about that at all. And they said, the Rosa Tralee is a lesbian and the PSI president is gay. I was trying to negotiate with Pat for a tiara, but the budget didn't quite stretch to it. My assuming the role of president of a professional body representing psychology would have been unthinkable until very recently. The election of an openly gay person to the role of president of PSI is reflective of massive social change nationally and internationally. Not too long ago, being gay or lesbian was pathologized by our own profession. Being lesbian or gay was considered a mental disorder. It was not until 1993, and I was 22, that the World Health Organization's classification of disease, the ICD-10 disease, removed homosexuality as a mental disorder. Such classifications, like the ICD-10 and DSM, provided the rationale, provided the implicit soft support for outrageous hate crimes against gay men and lesbian women in Ireland and throughout the world. The classifications resulted in apparent psychological interventions, such as reparative therapy, which I understand is still being practiced in Ireland today. For half of my life, just under half of my life, I was classified as mentally disordered because I was gay. What the mental health community said over these decades really contributed to a pretty troubled early life for me and for many other people, I'm sure. What psychology says matters. what we say really matters. What psychology says has implications for human beings, just like me, just like your brother or your sister or someone else that you love. What psychology says matters. But perhaps more importantly, the changes as epitomised by ICD-10 also warns of the potential we have as a profession to pathologise difference. The potential we have to partake in the oppression of minorities, to provide the scientific evidence which has been used to justify practices that are inhumane and cruel. With this in mind, it gives me incredible pleasure and delight to draw your attention to the recently finalised Lesbian, Gay and Bisexual, a Good Practice Guideline for Psychologists. This is a guide that was published, developed by the Special Interest Group in Sexual Identity, Sexual Diversity and Gender Issues, chaired by Geraldine Moe. Cheers here. This comprehensive, evidence-based guideline, these are real examples of what we do well as psychologists. We draw on reliable evidence and we reach conclusions. As President, I am committed to working with the SIG to advance these guidelines, to advance them in PSI, just as our sister professional organisations like the APA and the BPS have done. These guidelines are a wonderful example of how PSI can be proactive. These guidelines are a wonderful example of how PSI is ensuring it does not inadvertently support the oppression and pathologising of vulnerable groups of people by remaining silent. About 4 years ago, the then President, Mary Morrissey, Mary's here, was on Radio 1, and she was talking about the PSI had developed the 40 tips for for well-being to mark the 40th anniversary of PSI. And Mary was on, I think it might have been Pat Kenny, and she was being interviewed by the journalist and about these, and the journalist said, PSI is 40 years old, and Mary said, yes it is, and the journalist said, well, where have you been? Where has PSI been? And we were very struck by that question, and it resonated with me and several other people. Where have we been? Well, I've been thinking about this a little bit, and essentially we have spent those 40 years in development. That development only happened because of the countless hours that so many individuals have given to the society over the last 44 years. PSI began with 17 members in 1970, and now we have close to 2,500 members. We are here today because of their dedication, because of the dedication, the vision and the leadership of countless numbers of members of PSI over the last 44 years. We are here today because they didn't give up. But let's think about this a little bit more. Let's think about this as psychologists. So where has PSI been for 40 years? Well, from a developmental perspective, we have moved through the various life stages of development. And PSI is now entering its midlife, according to Erickson. We are approaching our 45th birthday as a society. And according to Erickson, we are in the generativity versus stagnation stage of life. The task at this life stage, according to Erickson, is about contributing to society, to the human project, about influencing the next generation. The existential questions that emerge at this point in one's life are really around, does my life matter? Have I contributed? What is my existence about? How might I avoid stagnation and embrace generativity? I understand that PSI's opportunity for generativity is located in our capacity to contribute to the betterment of the human project. But how does the Learned Society of Psychology in Ireland avoid stagnation and embark on a life stage marked by generativity? Well, I have a few ideas. I frequently have to remind myself that the society that we live in is one that we actively design. It's one that we actively create. It is not the result of an inevitable evolutionary process. The society we live in is the result of decisions that we make. Decisions that we make that say we want a society that cares for our most vulnerable and values human beings simply because they are that, human beings. Knowing that a society will be judged by how they care for their most vulnerable. And who better than psychologists to understand how vulnerability comes about in the first place? And who better than psychologists to know how to create a flourishing society? And who better than PSI, as the collective voice for psychologists in Ireland, to contribute to the betterment of the human project? Who better than the Learned Society, whose motto, proclaiming the vastness of the human mind, to advance the human project? And it takes the diversity of our profession, as expressed in science and education and practice, to unleash the potential of the vastness of the human mind. It takes the diversity. It takes the diversity to unharness the vast potential of the human project. It takes the many SIG, special interest groups and divisions within PSI to do this. It is with the skill set represented in PSI that can lead the way in advocating for a society where the psychological needs of our citizens are met. But more than met, where the capacity of our citizens is actualised, where the crippling socio-economic inequalities are addressed, where we agitate and educate and tell our policymakers that underinvestment in social capital will never lead to a sustainable economy, where understanding Ireland simply as an economy will result in economic and social ruin. This life stage is about finding and taking our place at the table where policies that shape and influence our lives and the lives of every citizen in this country are decided. I firmly believe that it is time for PSI to get actively involved in shaping and influencing national policies that in turn shape our experience from the cradle to the grave. I was thinking about this cradle to grave, sorry, you know what? That's a slide that looks at the combined rate of cancer deaths in Ireland between 2009 and 2011. That's per 1,000. So you can see in Blakestown, kind of West Blanchardstown, there are 381 per 1,000 deaths of cancer, compared to Castleknock, South East, where there's 128 per 1,000. That, to me, is just utterly unacceptable. And that is based on inequality. Back to the cradle and the grave. I was thinking about this, as I say, in terms of the cradle and the grave. Currently, there is no adult mental health service, infant mental health service in this country, with the exception of a fantastic, innovative service in Mallow, County Cork, started by Dr. Catherine Maguire in 2004. We are decades behind our European neighbours. There isn't a psychologist in this room who wouldn't disagree with the importance of the precious first years of our lives. We know from the literature that these precious first years are the most formative. We know that these precious first years influence one's well-being throughout the life cycle, and indeed the well-being of society. There is also, as we know, robust evidence that demonstrates that investment in perinatal and infant mental health services actually saves money. But we, as the professional body for psychology in Ireland, have remained silent on the absence of mental health services for infants during this critical stage of the human trajectory. We've got to be smart about these issues and other issues. We've got to get out from the clinic rooms and the labs and assert the positive health economics of early intervention. The bookend of our lives is our death. Every year in this country, 29,000 people die, and as many as 290,000 people are left bereaved. There are so many gaps when it comes to death and dying in Ireland, the result of which causes significant distress for the person themselves dying, their family, their loved ones, and often the staff who are trying to support them. And many would agree that better funding of end-of-life care would actually cost less. The final year of our lives is the most expensive due to increased hospitalisation and increased care needs. We currently allocate 73 million annually to specialist palliative care, but approximately 1.3 billion is spent on end-of-life care in Ireland annually. But this is largely unplanned and uncoordinated spending. This ad hoc approach is unfair to those dying and their families, and results in a kind of a postcode lottery access to services at end of life. And that simply isn't good enough. We have 155 hospice beds nationally. We should have 450. We have one psychology post in palliative care in this country. There are many counties, including Kilkenny, I understand, where there are no hospice beds at all. This lack of joined-up thinking is dangerous and it's damaging. It's costly in human and in economic terms. The report on end-of-life and palliative care in Ireland, published by the Joint Oireachtas Committee on Health and Children in July 2014, called for the development of a national strategy for end-of-life and bereavement care in Ireland. I take this opportunity to call on government to set out clear plans to progress this recommendation. There is no time to waste on this issue. We have only one chance to get good quality end-of-life care right. There's also a lot that psychology can say about the inevitability of death, about a society exhausting itself by running away from its mortality, and the inevitable suffering that this being human is all about. About these realities of our lives that are not curable. Perhaps we were asking the wrong questions. How can we find meaning as opposed to happiness? How can I be part of something bigger than myself rather than selfing myself to an early grave? PSI, I firmly believe, can help our policymakers to start asking the right questions, to start shifting the focus from the individual pursuit of happiness to social connectedness. Psychology can really help here by getting the questions right to begin with. And we understand, evaluate and contextualise the social inequalities, for example, that result in the stark health inequalities that I pointed out. Those inequalities basically mean a much shorter life for people simply because of their income. And to me, that's just not fair. Psychology has a range of skills, a range of skill sets that can make the difference here. It is this range of competencies that psychology has that can transform the experience of people as recipients of care in the health service. It is with this in mind that PSI will continue to the campaign of informing health providers of this country what each applied specialism has to offer, and how collectively we can provide a national comprehensive psychology service, a psychology service for all. We will advance this by presenting a model of a truly comprehensive psychology service, and thus providing the social cohesion that supports a strong and stable economy. Building on the work of Council over the last number of years around this issue, I would like to establish a working group to identify best international practice concerning applied psychologists in the health service, and from there to develop a proposal to transform psychology services in the HSE. This proposal to transform psychology service in the HSE will serve as our roadmap to negotiating and advancing a national comprehensive psychology service. This is going to take time. This is not going to be easy. But this is what we need to do. We need to present a model of service that will, by its very nature, include each of the specialisms within PSI. I'm committed to advancing this, and I propose, and we'll talk with Council about this, that we invite the Minister for Health to join us at conference next year, where we can discuss and advance this proposal and this issue. I'm really pleased to say that tomorrow night we will award for the first time the Equality and Inclusive Practice Award. It'll be awarded to Dr. Irene McNulty, who for many years has worked in the psychology service for refugees and asylum seekers. Many of you will know Irene and will know of her tireless work in the area. I don't think she's here this evening. She'll be here for dinner tomorrow evening. This award draws our attention to the tremendous work done in this area by many psychologists over the years who provided services to the most impoverished and the most traumatised of the new Irish. It also highlights the foresight of people like former presidents Dr. Joseph Duffy and Dr. Niall Pender, who established the PSI policy on equality and inclusive practice. But the professional body representing many of these fantastic clinicians remain silent about direct provision. Direct provision, as you know, is a very controversial system of dealing with asylum seekers in Ireland, established in 1999 as an emergency measure, but continues to this day. Direct provision has been referred to as the Magdalen laundries of our day. Direct provision has seen children born in this country spend their entire lives in a hotel room and, for example, never share a family meal together. It is hard to describe the psychological damage that such a system is causing to countless thousands of people throughout this country today. This will have impact that will be felt for many generations to come. We have been silent, like many other professional bodies, about this injustice. This is all the more unacceptable given the very recent and harrowing accounts of the lives destroyed in religious-run institutions, as documented by the Ryan Report in 2009. When will we learn? The forthcoming inclusion of psychology in the registration body for the health and social care professionals, CORU, provides PSI with some challenges and with many opportunities. I propose, I spoke with some colleagues last night about the history of CORU and PSI's relationship with that, and I understood that CORU had set the bar very low in calling for a psychologist, so anyone who has an undergraduate degree in psychology can call themselves a psychologist. But I've subsequently learned that that's actually not the case, that there had been negotiation, wide-ranging negotiation over the years that has resulted in that situation. The situation that's going to take place next year is one that I don't think is providing safety for people. So anyone with an undergraduate degree is legally entitled to call themselves a psychologist and register. So I've been having a think and a talk with various people about this, and I think there is a real opportunity for PSI to do something about this. And what I'd like us to consider, and we'll discuss with Council, is that we establish a chartership. So a model where the specialisms, the divisions, will award chartered status. So Dr. Byrne, for example, as a chartered health psychologist. I think the term chartership is one that has currency. People understand chartered accountant or chartered physiotherapist. So I think it's something we need to give time and consideration to. And I will establish a working group in the next month to review again the international practice around this area and to look at the implications that a proposal like that might have, to make recommendations to Council, and we would hope to advance that sooner rather than later. I'm delighted to say that because of the tireless work done on the articles and memos of association and on the strategic plan, will allow us move forward on some of these issues. It is my privilege to build on the enormous work done by PSI over the last 44 years, and more recently to our former president, Dr. Margaret O'Rourke, and to all of Council for Jerry in particular for the work done on articles and memos that will, I hope, free us up to be able to advance some of the issues that I've spoken about. The decades of generosity from the people I've mentioned and from lots of other people not mentioned bestow on us a very serious responsibility not to waste this opportunity, not to recoil from the next stage of life, the next life cycle stage of PSI. And one thing I know is for sure: we will stagnate if we only look inwards. I am excited to lead the Learned Society of Psychology in Ireland as it embarks on the next phase of the life cycle. I am excited to work with PSI in finding and taking its seat at the table where the policy that shapes the lives of our citizens from cradle to grave is decided, where we can use the knowledge of psychology in education, practice and science to create a society where the most vulnerable are loved, where difference is celebrated, and the enormous capacity of the human project for creating a compassionate, economically vibrant, inclusive and socially connected society is realised. This is how PSI will flourish in the future. It will flourish because psychologists want to be part of a professional body that shapes policy, speaks emphatically, compassionately and tenderly, and takes its place confidently at the table with the grown-ups. Thank you very much.